Humans. So for about the past, I don't know, 15 years, I have been having, probably 2 or 3 times a month when we're good, sometimes 4 times a month, get together with a dear friend of mine. So we get together and we just kind of chew on bones about everything, about cultural issues, about education, about social justice, about DEI, about we debate a lot about science and the nature of what we can know. What can we really know? And the nature of science itself, epistemology. So we get to chew on some very big bones that I enjoy. And because we differ in our perspectives, it's always enjoyable to me because it helps me, steel sharpens steel. And to have someone who can hold me accountable when I wander off too far and am making inferences or deductions that really aren't supported by either the data or logic, I really appreciate having a friend who can point those things out. And it keeps me accountable. It keeps my edge sharp and it makes me a better thinker than I would be had I never met him and had we not engaged in these conversations over all these years. So when I came across Glenn Loury and John McWhorter a couple of years ago, I forget what you guys' old podcast name was, the two black, Glenn used to introduce us as the two black guys, and it has since become the Glenn Show. I love the interaction that you guys have. It reminded me of my interaction with my friend and the collegiality of it and the good nature ribbing and the accountability that you hold with one another. The level of the dialogue, right? The erudition, the scope of the conversation, the ability to really zoom out and to make connections and inferences among kind of disparate spheres of human activity. It takes a good brain to do that. And I appreciate the way that you guys have done that and have modeled for me, or at first you reflected for me, the kind of dynamic that my friend and I have. And I think that you model for all of us who are in your audience the rules of fair play in intellectual dialogue, and you pull the curtain back on the kind of rigor that we should all hold ourselves to, a standard of rigor and accountability that we should have for ourselves and for one another. Very, very powerful, and to do so respectfully and with good nature and even humor elevates it to the level of art beyond just the pragmatic concerns of communicating ideas and trying to be logically consistent and make a rationally compelling argument. You do it with a level of grace and style that makes you must watch YouTube content for me every single week. And I have enjoyed it for a long time. So I first want to thank you both for the contribution that you make to all of us in this community. And I'm mindful that when I talk about Glenn in particular, and I'm going to focus on Glenn, John, I'll give you a little love at a separate video. When I think about Glenn in particular, who is an economist at an esteemed university, Brown University. I once entertained dreams of going to Brown. A well-renowned economist. I believe he also participates in a think tank, and has been lauded among his peers and the academic community as a man of substance. And he brings that gravitas to bear in every podcast that is released. And the temptation, as I've heard him described as a black intellectual, which I think is an unnecessary qualifier. Black is Glenn is an intellectual. Glenn is an economist. I don't know what a black intellectual is. I don't know what a black economist. Does a black economist look at a different set of data, process it with different formula, look at it through a different lens? I'm sure that it can inform a perspective, but fundamentally, economics is economics. It is a human endeavor. Similarly, John is a writer to me. He's not a black writer, although he does concern himself with topics that apply to the black community and the cultural dynamics that we face in right now. He's just a writer to me, and that's the way I'd like to keep it. So, Glenn, recently you've been recently underwent some surgery, and I hope that has that you're into your recovery. And I just want to spend a few minutes giving you some flowers that I think are well-deserved, because I think it's important that we give gratitude to those who have helped us, and you have helped me on so many ways. Number one, I admire your contrarianness. I think it almost always takes more courage, average courage in a human being, to express a contrarian opinion than it does to kind of follow along with the rest of the pack. That's an easy thing when you look over your shoulder and we're good, right? Yeah? You believe this too? Yeah? You got my back when I say this? Yeah? That's easy. Yeah? But when you're willing to take stances, and many of his stances are of a conservative nature, and as he expresses them, go counter to the typical kinds of tropes and language that is often found in the black community when talking about economic issues and just some of the larger issues that black people face in the United States and globally. He takes a contrarian position on a lot of those things that makes people uncomfortable. Consequently, he has some discomfort because he's pushing back. So when you occupy a contrarian position, you typically need to do your homework, because you can't anticipate that they're going to come after you. So he typically comes loaded for bear. And I love when Glenn gets on a roll. When Glenn starts to cook, I just love to lay back and let the man and listen to the man cook. There are few people who have the eloquence and the gift that he does. You do, Glenn. When you are making a particularly impassioned plea about something you feel deeply about. One of the things that you said recently that repeats in my memory again and again, and I occasionally see it brought up, YouTube algorithm brings it up as a short. And I'm not going to recall it exactly, but it's generally the sense was you saying, "Get your fucking hands off my dignity. Get your fucking hands off my dignity." One more time for Dr. Umar. Get your fucking hands off my dignity. I don't need you to help me and my people. We are eminently capable of helping ourselves. And in fact, Glenn is an object lesson in that capacity, that capability. He sets an amazing example for what perseverance, grit, intelligence, the gift, he has the gift, and hard work can achieve. When a person is committed to it. If I need your help, I'll ask. But until then, get your fucking hands off of me. I didn't ask for any of this. I admire that. I admire that in a human, and I particularly find it attractive in a man. That ethic. I like, Glenn, that there's a saying, and I will maul it because my memory is not so good at these things. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small men and minds, which I've always taken to say, I thought what I thought based on what I understood, the evidence that I was presented, and my capacity to process it and understand it, and the level of my development. All those things converge to produce my opinion on any given subject. And if I should learn something new, if I become wiser and take a new glance at that old data and find myself in my argument lacking, I have an intellectual responsibility to shift my position, and furthermore, to have enough courage to do so publicly. And I like that Glenn is very comfortable in saying, yeah, I came up and I was a really strong lefty. And at a certain point, factors and forces converged in my life, and I became a liberal. And I embraced that and advocated strongly for liberal and progressive positions. And as I lived longer and observed more and came to understand more about the consequences of some of the things that I supported, upon finding that maybe they weren't as reliable or as predictable as I had hoped, he reserved the right to change his mind yet again. So this being willing to go back and forth between a liberal and a progressive, liberal and a conservative position is very familiar to me. And I almost think it is the only defensible position that one can take intellectually. We are part of a great unfolding of knowledge in humanity. And certain things just do not surface until due time. And when those things surface, you have to look at them in the context in which they are in that moment, and not what they would have represented 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. This reality has surfaced in this year, and my awareness and my understanding all converge to make me have this new opinion. So be it. It seems the only defensible way to be, and to have this foolish consistency of I've never changed my mind. I felt this way when I was 18, and now that I'm 62, I feel the same way. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. By and large, there are a few things that survive the gauntlet of those 50 years, in my opinion. Most things just don't hold up that long because we just don't know what we don't know until we know it. I love the way, Glenn, that you're able to hold frame even in really thorny topics. I recall a conversation that you had with Charles Murray about IQ, and in particular, it focused on blacks having I think a standard deviation on average, a standard deviation lower IQ than than whites. And obviously, you're black. And participating in a conversation that is making some difficult statements about the black community, were I in your shoes, I would feel a little bit uncomfortable. But again, one of the ways that I learned from you is the grace that you observed, that you displayed. Because you know, along that bell curve, that you live on that right tail, and that the average IQ, you're not an average, you are an individual. And that your ability to understand the value of having a high IQ and understanding the cost of not having it. And being willing, it was critically important. And then to further be able to go deeper into the discussion and to explore some issues of causality. I think it's one thing for us to say it is this way. The next question I think that we should be exploring is, so how did it get to be that way? And if we understand how we have arrived at this situation, now what can we do? And I think that one of the, out of that conversation with Charles Murray, I think it was fairly evident that we're not just stuck. Nutrition, early education, the cultural forces that surround the cultivation of intelligence and having books in the home, something as simple as that. Having a parent that is engaged actively and frequently in a child's education, absolutely critical. And I would bet that among families whose children test well, that a lot of those kinds of factors, positive factors, were present. Okay. So I admire your ability to remain objective and to hold frame in a situation like that, and to really because you didn't personalize it or take offense, you were able to really just lock into it and bring a level of analysis and perspective that would otherwise not have the gravitas that it did coming from a white person. So you made it stickier. Your thoughts made the discussion stickier for me. I love your ability to steelman an argument effortlessly. I often find that when you are doing an interview, that you will go into present a perspective that I know is not yours, but you present it so compellingly, so logically, and so genuinely, then I know you have thought through the flip side of an argument deeply. That's the only way that you could so comfortably steelman the opposing opinion and the arguments that someone else makes. So that says to me, and so you do it so fluidly, and you don't even have to. And often the person goes, "You're playing devil's advocate because this isn't Glenn Loury, right?" And you often will have to call out your devil's advocacy because you do it so compellingly. You do it so earnestly. You are earnestly arguing the countervailing opinion. And what that reminds me of is the rigor that you do in your own mind as you're tumbling around, that you're able to argue both of these perspectives, and that you actually do argue them genuinely, fairly within yourself. And that's why when it comes to arguing them with someone else who happens to hold your opinion, because you are in pursuit of a truth, you know that that opinion that you hold still needs to be tested, and your ability to go in and test it with a guest by playing that devil's advocate role. I find it helpful guidance to me. It's an excellent model for aspiring intellectuals to observe. It's quality work. Yeah, I could go on and on. I admire you, Glenn. The world is better with your voice in it. I hope that you will continue to be as fertile and productive as you have been. I also admire as I enter, as I'm now in my 60s, and I know that the road does not go on forever in my life, and the finite nature of life is becoming more and more apparent and part of my consciousness, and that I see you with a fire that propels you to wring yourself out. You are wringing it out. You are going to burn all the firewood. I love that. Your productivity, your commitment to your intellectual productivity. Admirable. I don't need to tell you to not go gently into that good night, because you already rage against the dying light. Rage. Rage.